building a network, showing your expertise, and being findable by recruiters. So first question I might have for everybody is, first of all, I think it's like Superman or Superwoman, where on the outside, it seems like maybe it's a boring platform. It's not as exciting as, say, Instagram, but underneath, incredibly powerful. So just in the chat, if you're comfortable doing it, put a Y for if you're new to job search, put an N if you've been looking a little while, and put an exclamation point if you're not in job search, you just wanted to see what this presentation was all about. So a Y for new to job search, N for longer to job search, and an exclamation point if you're just curious. Wonderful, wonderful. I see the results coming in. Thank you for putting that. So it's a mix of people who are just starting to look and people who may have been looking for a little while, and then people who are here for other reasons. That's always good to know, right, who my audience is. So one of the things we need to talk about is things have changed. Is it behavior as usual on LinkedIn? Is it not? And this is true for everything, for job search, for sales. People are trying to figure out how to engage in this new normal, especially because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with somebody else. So everything from, you don't know if somebody's on to some video interview or a conversation with you. You don't know if they have kids trying to do their homework behind them. You don't know if they have somebody in the hospital. So it's time to be compassionate for other people and not make assumptions, and also compassionate for ourselves. So, you know, you've probably seen all these posts, people saying, oh, now's a great time to learn a new skill. Well, you know what? I don't have the energy to learn a new skill. I want to just go to bed at 9 o'clock, and that's okay. So some things about job search specifically that are a little different now. Obviously, one will be, how are you going to have those interviews? They're going to be video interviews. So doing things like this Zoom meeting and practicing getting online and engaging with your video on is going to be a great thing to do, because people are already doing video interviews. I actually had one, it must have been 10 years ago, which was a strange thing for me. I wasn't used to being on video at that time. So getting comfortable with that. Networking is now online. So you're not going to the diner or the event in the morning or the evening, you're online. So it's really important to get comfortable with the technology. And they're all pretty similar, but some just tips and things to think about. One is, when you're having a conversation, your natural inclination is going to be to look at the pictures, including the image of yourself. But for people to feel like you're talking to them when they're looking at the screen, if I'm looking down at myself, it looks like I'm looking down. But now I'm looking at my camera, and it feels like I'm having a conversation just with you. So something I did in the beginning to get used to this, I took a Post-it and I drew a smiley face, and I put it behind my camera so that I would get used to looking at that as if it was a face instead of looking down at the images. Other behaviors that are different, obviously, we don't know. Companies are still hiring, but it's a little different. They don't know what's going to be going on with them. Some companies, of course, are laying off. Some companies are making people take pay cuts. So let's look at what we can be doing to have a really strong LinkedIn profile and presence and strengthen our networks. And if you have any questions as we go, put them in the chat and we'll take them later. The first thing I want to go over is connection levels on LinkedIn. First connection is if I've sent a request to someone or they sent it to me and I said yes. So at some point when Denise and I met, one of us sent an invite, the other said yes. We are first connections. So I see somebody here, Teresa. If Denise is connected to Teresa, but I am not, that means Teresa is a second connection to me. There's one person in between us, Denise. And the power of that, we'll talk about in a minute, A third connection is more like a second cousin twice removed. LinkedIn doesn't show you that path. So the real power in job search, in sales, in anything with networking and with LinkedIn, second connections. Those second connections are people that work at companies where you'd like to work, and you know somebody that can make an introduction, that person you know in between. Incredibly powerful. When I thought I was looking for a job before I started my business, I saw a job listing. Instead of just applying, I looked to see if I could find the person. I found a person I thought was the hiring manager. I looked at her profile. The next day, she looked at my profile. At the time, you could send a message to somebody through groups if you're in a similar group. So I sent her a message. I didn't say, oh, are you the hiring manager? I must have said something about an information interview, which if you have never heard of that, that's the idea of having a conversation with somebody about their career path or their company and not necessarily talking about a job. We had the best conversation. She wasn't the hiring manager. She didn't like where she was working. And we've stayed in touch all these years later. So she was a second connection. I wasn't comfortable asking someone to introduce me to her, so I introduced myself. So there's that power in those second connections. So does everybody understand the concept of what a first connection is and a second connection is? Let's go back to the chat. Why for yes, you get the connection levels and you have a question or you're confused about it. Why for yes, I understand first and second connections, and for no. All right, you get it. Excellent. Excellent. All right, now we're going to talk about your profile. I like to think of it as real estate. The real estate that LinkedIn gives you, and you control the message. How often do you get to control the message about yourself? Not very often. You know, you send a resume, it goes into a big black hole, you have no idea. You own this space. It's like your own personal website, but on LinkedIn. So let's talk about all the different places that LinkedIn lets you control that message, because sometimes it's not completely obvious, which is why I have a business. So yay. All right. Fact or fiction, your headline, which is the text under your name. Should that be your job title? If you think yes, it should be your job title. So if your job title is, I don't know, VP at Citibank, should that be in your headline or should it be something else? Why for it should be your headline and or no way, right, Victor? Exactly. So I like to think of it as your 120 character elevator pitch. And the thing that's a little tricky here is it can say so much more than just your job title, but when you're in job search, recruiters are using the recruiter package of LinkedIn. This is a paid package that they get, and they can search on different things. So they can search by skills, they can search by words that show up in your profile, they can search by jobs that you've had. And there's some assumption, LinkedIn doesn't tell you this, there's some assumption that the first place it looks is your headline. So while I like to think of it as your 120 character elevator pitch, if you're searching for a job, I would try to get the job title that you want or that you have and you want to make the next step as part of your headline. So I think I have an example. Let's see. Yes, I do. So here's an example of somebody, he's not in job search, but it's a good example. If you notice his headline gives his job title, Assistant VP Lead Generation Client Services, but it also says something about what he does. It says providing qualified leads to help acquire lasting customers. So that not only is that his job title so that a search would find him, it tells you immediately what he does. Make sense? So is there anybody who is comfortable putting in what they think a good headline for themselves might be into the chat? I understand if you're not comfortable with it, but is anybody comfortable trying out a headline for themselves. Don't be shy. Okay, so Mona, great. Compliance innovator, protecting revenue through partnership, strategy, and execution. So, and Victor, 120 characters is how many that you have. Although I'll tell you a little secret, it could change. I am convinced that the mobile people and the desktop people at LinkedIn do not know each other and sit in separate buildings and aren't allowed to speak to each other. For some reason, if you need another character or two, you can do it on mobile. But then if you want to change it again on desktop, it doesn't let you. So Mona, what's great about yours is it immediately says compliance. So if somebody's looking to hire somebody in compliance, they're going to find you. But then when they get to it, right away, it says what you do, protecting revenue through partnership, strategy, and execution. And Victor, award-winning environmental and social expert with US and worldwide experience. So I'm not exactly sure what that means, but somebody who would be hiring you for those skills would find you for that, right? The word environmental, if they were searching for that. Thank you for sharing, both of you. That was very helpful. So now we're looking at the top section of your profile, which is the most important part, because we have no way of knowing if somebody, when they get to your page, if they're going to scroll or not. They see this first view. The four most important parts: one, your photo. Yes, you have to have one. I know it's weird. None of us like how we look. We're getting used to that on video, aren't we? Right? Obsessing over if my hair is out of place or whatever it might be, the glare on my glasses that I can't get rid of. You have to have a photo. It should be professional looking. Doesn't necessarily have to be professionally done, but it shouldn't have your arm cut off from wrapped around somebody. It shouldn't be you at a wedding in a tux, unless that your business has you wear a tux. So you do need a photo, and it should look like you. In the old days, a month ago, I would have said if somebody met you in person, you would want them to recognize you. So now it's if they saw you on video or on Zoom, you would want them to recognize you. The next thing, which we already talked about, is your headline. Again, it's your 120 character elevator pitch. You can say so much more. And I always pick on Citibank. I'm sorry, Citibank. I always say, if somebody says VP at Citibank as their headline, well, practically everyone there is a VP. What does that tell me? Nothing. But if they say VP at Citibank, responsible for loans to middle market companies, or responsible for the hospitality industry, whatever it might be. So something more specific. The next thing, notice the graphic with, in this case, the Andrews Wharton logo. You can change that background image. I think of that as your personal billboard. Depending what your job is, there may or may not be something that makes sense to put there. Some companies will provide, so Andrews Wharton, in this case, provided that logo that he could put there. But if he was in job search, and he might put something that implied providing leads or whatever it might be. If you don't put something, then it's just that blue graphic with sort of the constellation look. So, and I always get asked, well, I'm not a graphic designer. How can I make that graphic? There's an amazing tool. I'm going to type it in the chat called Canva. It's a free, and I started as a graphic designer, so I hate saying don't hire a graphic designer, but if you easily want to make a graphic, they have lots of templates. It's super easy to use. They have free graphics, also some paid graphics. I do see a comment in the chat. I'm not comfortable with needing a photo. Yes, it's a challenge, and I don't have an answer for it. It's one of those things, because everyone has a photo, you are expected to have a photo. Nobody wants to engage with that gray head, empty picture. I honestly don't have a way to, I don't know what to do about that, but you are expected to have one. And people who are recruiting want to see you. They feel like they know you then. All right, so you can have that background graphic. The next thing is, if you work for a company, if you have your own company page, you want to connect to that company page so that the logo shows up rather than the gray box. If you're in transition, a question I always get is, well, how long do I keep the old company up? And when do I go to that I'm in job search or whatever it might be? I don't necessarily have, I think that, I can't remember the woman's name, but there's a woman that does the job search boot camp. She might have a better sense from a recruiter standpoint, what they expect to see. I think with right now, what's going on, so many people are on furlough, so many people are looking for work. So I personally don't think there's anything wrong with putting up an experience section saying that you're in job search or that you're freelancing or whatever it might be. So I actually, 10 years ago, that's what I started with. I put Beth Granger Consulting and never changed the name. All right, so those are the 4 most important sections. And yes, Victor, you're right about that. Stats show that profiles with photos are viewed more than ones without. Yes, and Maria, that was her name. Thank you. Okay, so you have this top section, the most important section, but there's so much more. You can have a custom URL. If you happen to have LinkedIn open right now, go take a look at your page. So click on your photo on the top left and go to your page, and you might see something like linkedin.com/in/ your first name, your last name, and a whole bunch of numbers. Well, you don't want to put that on your resume, or you don't want to put that in an email sign-off. It looks kind of not professional. If you look on the top right of your profile page, so not the home page, your page, it says edit public profile and URL. You can get rid of all the numbers and have it be linkedin.com/in/ your first name and your last name, maybe your first name and a dash and your last name. If you have a super common name, unfortunately, you might have to put a middle initial or do something else, but it can be so much more professional looking. You can put it on your resume and have it be clickable. You can put it on your business cards. Someday we will go out there in the world and have business cards again. And you can put it on your email sign-off so that people can connect with you. So I love that one because a lot of people don't know that's there. It's just sort of, there, but what does it mean? While you're on that page, you can also look at what your public profile looks like. And what that means is if somebody is given your name and they Google you, but they're not logged into LinkedIn at the time, it's what they'll see. So I've never been able to come up with a really good reason for it. But if, for instance, you didn't want the general public to see what school you went to, you could turn that off and have it be only if somebody was logged into LinkedIn. I've never really come up with a good reason to do that because we want our information out there, but maybe you have one. All right, so you have your URL now. The next thing, we're basically working our way down the profile. The next thing is the About section. You'll notice in this example, you see about 2 lines, and then there's a see more. There are way more characters. I've lost track. I have to look it up. They changed it, maybe 1,200, 1,300. I forget how many you can have offhand, but this is if your headline is your 120 character elevator pitch. Your about is what you say when someone says, oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more? And it can also explain things if there's some weird career gap. If you've had 2 wildly different career paths. I know somebody who does what I do in terms of the LinkedIn training, but he's also in credit card processing. Those are very different things. Somehow he explains it there. Plus, because you only see the first 2 lines, there's a saying about writing for the web. It's lead with the need. And what that means is put the most important thing first, because in case somebody doesn't click that see more, put what you want them to know. I know someone who's in sales, and so he starts his with, I've been in sales since my first lemonade stand. Now that would make me want to read more, right? It's telling a story. So it should sound like you, it should tell a story, it can explain things, but it's not your job description. It's more about you. One of my clients is in insurance, and he has something about helping his clients sleep at night, right? So you want to make people have a visualization in their mind when you describe what it is you do, why you do it, all those kinds of things. And LinkedIn doesn't give us the data, so we don't know how many people click on that see more. So again, another reason you want those first 2 lines to be really good. Something new that's coming out, we'll talk about in a minute, but I think I have a graphic. So we'll talk about featured, but I want to show you something. I don't know how many of you have heard about having custom resumes for each job, where you customize it to use the words that are in the job description so that the ATS, applicant tracking system, will like it and not kick it out. You can do the same thing on LinkedIn. So if you see a job description and you're like, oh my God, that's the job I want, you can go to a word cloud site. So there, you can just Google it. The one I did this in was called Word It Out. I'll put it in the chat. But there are tons of them. You take the words, and it has a limit, so you may not be able to take the full job description. You put it in that word cloud, and what comes up is the words that are used more frequently, so we can assume are more important to them, will be larger. So in this case, the one that I put in, you'll notice that the word marketing is the largest word. And then other words, investment. So this was a job for a financial writer, I believe. So, right, so you want to then have those words in your about section and your job description. So I love this technique. This is great. This works for resumes as well. And you'll notice, right, the word include, that's not going to matter so much. So after you do that, there is something that is rolling out. Not everybody has it yet. It's called featured. And I'm just going to go back. If you don't have featured, you can attach graphics, video, PDFs to your about section, and it will be a very small graphic that people can click on. When you have featured, it takes up a lot of space. So what happens is, I call it a scroll stopper. So especially if somebody's looking at your profile on their phone by chance, and they're scrolling with their thumb, it makes them stop because it takes a lot of room. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to essentially pin things you want people to see up towards the top of your profile. It can be an article that you've written on LinkedIn. We'll get to the difference between article and actually, do we? No. So I'll tell you real quickly. A post is when you just share something on LinkedIn, and you can also write articles. That's more like blogging on LinkedIn. So in this example, I've linked to 2 articles that I wrote so that they're easy to find and people will see them. You can also feature a post. So if you've written a post and it's got a lot of good engagement and you want it to not disappear, you can feature that. And you can change it as often as you like. So this can show your expertise if you write an article about the area you're in. So for instance, Mona, if you write something about compliance innovator, what that means, like what is a compliance innovator, or you would understand things that recruiters or people in your industry would want to talk about. And a question about the word cloud. Can you copy the actual text from a LinkedIn job post to a word cloud? Yes, that's what I did in the example. I copied the text, put it in the word cloud just to see what words. I mean, you can pretty much tell when you read it, but not always. So it helps to visualize it for you. So this featured section, I don't know when it's going to be completely rolled out. Actually, let's do and you may not know yet, but Let's do a Y if you have it and you know you have it, and an N in the chat if you think you don't have it or haven't seen it. Basically, if you don't have it, you won't see it on someone else's. So if you went to my profile, I'm actually not sure if this content would show up. Yes, no, a little of both. Okay. If you may have it and not know, if you've never tried to attach media to your About section. So if you go to your profile, the blue button that says Add Section, you might see featured in there. Or, here's another way, a little trick. If you've done a post, look at that post, and on the top right, there'll be 3 gray little dots. And if you click there, there are a couple of options. If one of them is feature this post, I think that's the wording, then you'll know that you have it, and it will put that in the place where I have the articles on your page. Okay, so moving further down, right? You have now your about and your headline and your background graphic, that's the billboard, and your custom URL, and you're featured. What's next? A question first. What do you think? You can share any document, graphic, or video that you find online on your profile, like in the featured section or elsewhere. What do you think? Yes in the chat if you think you can, and if you think you can't. What do you think? So this is if you see a photo you want to use. We have a yes. Some people say yes, some people say no. Okay. I will tell you which it is. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV or on Zoom. You must have rights to any content that you put on your profile. The difference is you can share something you see somewhere else. So maybe you read an article and you think it's really interesting. You can share it as a post and say, hey, I read this article, it's really interesting. You cannot take that article, a PDF of it, for instance, and put it on your profile. Hopefully you understand the difference. Same with a graphic. Maybe you want a graphic of, I don't know, people shaking hands. You can't just go on Google and grab any photo that you find. Somebody has the copyright to that and the rights to that, and you can get in trouble. Now, moving along, further down is your experience section. This is where you put your job information, and this is where it's different than a resume. You can tell a story. You can talk about projects that you worked on. It's actually much easier, in my opinion, because on a resume, there's a very specific format, right? You have to put action words in the beginning, and you really have a chance to be able to tell a story. And I like that a lot. Plus, if you've had multiple roles in that same organization, you'll notice here on mine, it's a little different, but not exactly, right? So it's my company, but you'll see where I have the bold text. Those are separate roles. So if you were promoted from one job to another and you link to that same company page, it will connect them under the logo. And again, you have quite a bit of space where you can describe what your role was, who you worked with, why you liked it, get those keywords in there. And again, whether or not to put that you're in job search, some people will put that. They'll put that they're freelancing, that they're consulting. Some people will leave their previous job for a little while, depending on what's going on in the world and in their life. So you want to make sure that you connect to the company pages, if they exist, of any company that you worked at. And the way you do that, in case you don't know, is you click on that one job as if you were going to change the job title or the company or any information. And if you aren't linked up, you get rid of the text that's the name of the company, you start typing, and you wait a second, and the companies will pop up, and you'll click on that company page, and it will connect you up. So when somebody comes here, and if they were to click on, mine's not a good example, I should have used somebody else, but if they were going to click on Beth Granger Consulting, they would be able to go to the company page, see all the other people that work there, etc. And a question back from Featured is, Ariel asks, can you get a completion badge on Featured? Do you mean if you've taken a course and you can pin it to? Yes, I don't think so, unless you took a picture of it. You might be able to do that, and you could do it as a post. So you can get a completion badge under education. I don't know if I have a screenshot of that, but I can send that to you, or I can see if we have time to go live and look for it. But you might be able to do a post saying, hey, I took this class and it was really interesting, and then you could feature that post. Okay, so also, just like there's that featured section, in the experience section, if it makes sense, you can attach media. So for instance, in mine, I have some articles that I was featured in. You'll notice that one is a link. I'm allowed to do that because I'm linking to it in the place that it was. So I don't remember where this was. Say that was Long Island Business News. I don't have to have rights to it because I'm taking people to the original source. One of the others, you'll notice it has a document icon. That's because I actually paid for the rights to have the PDF and put the PDF on my profile. Maybe there's a capabilities brochure, public capabilities brochure. Maybe you were in a video from the company. There could be different things that you can attach to your profile. Moving further down, next comes skills and endorsements. When LinkedIn added this, I kind of thought, this is really silly. It's a waste of time. I don't like it. But because people are using it, I figured out a good way to use it. Two things. One, recruiters can look for skills. So if you see, this is another place to use those keywords. And sometimes things are worded differently. So maybe you're in HR and you want to put that you're an HR director. Well, some companies are now calling HR directors people managers. So you might want to put both as a skill. You might want to put people manager and HR director. The other thing is, I use it as a thank you. If somebody makes an introduction for you, so maybe you see a job listing at a company, someone you know makes an introduction for you into that company, you can go to their profile and endorse them for something you know that they can do as a thank you. The other thing is you can have, I believe it's up to 50 now. They were going to change it at one point. So I think it's still 50 skills, but only 3 show without clicking show more. You can change the order. The default order is most endorsed to least endorsed. But what if there's something in there you really want up in that first 3? You can change it. When you click into that section, you'll notice that the first 3 have blue pins, like push pins. If you uncheck one, it gives you a spot to move something else. You go find the one you want, you click on the pin, it moves it up. So skills and endorsements. If you're in financial services and are regulated by FINRA or something like that, where you can't endorse or you can't be endorsed, you can actually turn this section off. Next, what comes after skills and endorsements? Recommendations. We practically don't need to send people to speak to our references because we can get these recommendations right on your profile. You want to do this. You also want to give recommendations. Again, that's a way to thank somebody who's given you a referral. It's a way to thank a colleague who's wonderful. It's a way to thank a former boss or somebody that worked for you. Fact or fiction? Put it in the chat. Yes for yes and Y for no. I mean, and N for no. You shouldn't ask people to write you a recommendation. What do you think? Yes for wait, that may be confusing with a yes. Basically, do you think that it's okay to ask, or do you not think it's okay to ask? Okay, Larry says yes, yes, yes. Okay to ask, yes. Here's a little secret. The best time to ask, some of us are a little uncomfortable, right? Like, I don't know, I don't want to ask. The best time to ask is when someone is saying thank you. Now, depending on where you are in your job search, it might not be happening right now. But if someone says thank you to you, that's the great time to say, oh, you're welcome. Would you write that? Now is a great time, if you're in transition, to reach out to former colleagues, former boss, former whoever, and say, hey, would you be comfortable writing me a LinkedIn recommendation? Then I'm always asked, how do I get them to do it? Literally, technically, where do they click? Not everybody's so comfortable on LinkedIn, right? So you go to their profile. This is my friend Siobhan. You go to the More button, and one of the options is request a recommendation. Notice right below it is recommend. So I could not only ask Siobhan for a recommendation, I could give her one. Any questions on recommendations? You really want to try to get some of those. I think it's a great thing. I don't think recruiters necessarily search for them, but if they're checking you out on your page and they're there, right? People saying how fabulous you are. You always want someone else to say how fabulous you are, as well as you implying it and saying it by what you put on your profile. Okay. What about any tips on, okay, how to write a strong recommendation? So I actually have a friend, he's an expert in ethics, which is really interesting. And he has a format for writing recommendations that I don't know if I remember, but I like to just honestly say what I think somebody does that's really, that they're really good at. You can also ask the person, if you're going to write somebody a recommendation, you can ask them if there's something specific that they would like you to highlight. So maybe you worked on a project together and you could say, I worked with so-and-so on this project and they were decisive and creative and had great teamwork. So depending on what it is, really just write from the heart, write what you think somebody's good at. They don't have to accept it. They can ask for a change. So I once got one and had a typo in it, so I asked them to fix that. And again, you can ask them, if you're going to write one for somebody, you can ask them what to highlight. The same is if somebody says they'll write one for you, there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, thank you so much. Hey, would you mind highlighting that project we worked on together, or this thing about my skills, that type of thing. And Victor asks, it appears to be too cold of a way to ask for a recommendation. Any comments? Meaning to say, with somebody saying thank you, and I don't think it is. I think it's there. If someone's saying thank you, they want to do something because they're happy with the job that you've done. And when people are looking for jobs, if you have a strong relationship with somebody, you wouldn't ask someone you didn't have a strong relationship with to write a recommendation. So you can just be honest and say, hey, would you write me a recommendation? Okay, now there are all these other sections. Oh, let's see. No, I meant through a LinkedIn menu. Well, I would ask for it by email or on the phone or by text, some other way first. And then this is just literally how you do it. I wouldn't blindly go and ask somebody for a recommendation. Yeah, okay, I wasn't clear about that. All right, next, there are all these other sections. Education, yes, you want to put that. Licenses and certifications, if that makes sense for your what you do, absolutely put those. Volunteer experience for everyone, but especially if you're in job search, put this, because for so many reasons. One, it shows that you're a well-rounded person and that you have other interests. And I just noticed it got dark. I was saying earlier that usually I do live things during the day, and I have the daylight coming in. So volunteer. The other thing is, you never know what causes the people who are hiring care about, and it's a conversation starter. So you can look, if you're going to have an interview, for instance, check them out on LinkedIn. By chance, maybe you have the same cause that you care about, or you learn so much by reviewing someone else's profile. So definitely put your volunteer experience. Accomplishments. So some of these don't make sense for, I'm assuming for most of you, for instance, test scores, unless you just graduated, you're not going to put your test score. If you speak multiple languages, absolutely put that. Projects is an interesting one. That is, if you worked on a project that you can talk about publicly with other people, you can set it up and you can tag them. So you can say, we worked on the, I don't know, compliance manual, and you can put the other people and they get to link to that same project. Publications is if you've written for some online article or something like that, you can link to it from publications. Organizations, how that's a little different than volunteer experience, to me, is you might be involved in, now when you do volunteer experience, whoops, going too far ahead here. When you go to volunteer experience, you can talk about it. So you can say, I worked with this organization, we raised this money, we did this, that, and the other thing. With organizations, it's just a link. So I'm trying to think of, I forget what I have on mine, but I have a couple where it's just organization, but volunteer experience is more. And you can link to the, for volunteer experience, you can link to the company page of that organization. Okay, and let's see, a question is, does the person see that you've reviewed their page? If you mean, if you've gone to their page, do they know that? That has to do with your setting, and we can talk about that later. So remind me later to get back to that question. And Ariel asks, I'm doing some panel guest speaking. I couldn't find something for that. Yeah, that's a tricky one because there isn't a separate category for that. I think there should be, because it's so much of what I do. I put that actually under my experience. So let's go back real quick. You'll notice I have, as a second role within my organization, I have professional speaker, panelist, and moderator. So you could make it a separate company, essentially, if you want to highlight it in that way. Yeah, they don't really have a great spot for it. Maybe we should tweet to them and maybe they'll do it. So all of these extra sections, if they apply to you, absolutely. I know people that have patents. Put them out there, of course. Put those patents. Now let's talk about networking. Networking in general and networking in this funny time that we're in. What I recommend you do is go to your settings, which are on the top right under where it has your picture and it says me. You go down to settings and privacy, or privacy and settings, I forget which comes first. And you scroll down on that page that comes up, and there's a section that says getting a copy of your data. Did you know you could do this? You can download, first of all, tons of information, but the one that I'm going to talk about now is connections. You will get a spreadsheet with the first name, last name, job title, I forget if it has company name, and the date that you connected of all your connections. Because I don't know about if you're like me, I don't remember everybody I'm connected to, but maybe I want to be networking with people in a certain industry if I'm looking for a job, or for me, for a client in that industry. So you have this spreadsheet and you can sort it. Sort by the company name. Oh, look at all these people I happen to know at XYZ company. Didn't know that they worked there and they have a job I want. So now is the perfect time, with everybody being at home, even though they might be busy, and remember that whole compassion piece, right? You don't know, maybe they won't have the time, but some people are craving conversation because they're stuck at home, and reach out to your connections. Maybe you haven't talked to somebody in a while. Maybe they work at a company you'd love to work at. Maybe they are in a role you would like to have, either for your next role or in the future, and you can have one of those information interviews with them. If you're connected with them, you can reach out and talk to them. So this spreadsheet is really quite useful. And again, that's you go to privacy and settings, or settings and privacy, and scroll down. It is on that first tab. It used to allow you to have people's email address. They took that feature away because I guess people were just adding them to their email list when they shouldn't be. In addition, I don't know how many of you do networking, but when I lost my job back in 2010, I was very lucky. I went to outplacement services and they said, tell everyone you know you're looking. My life insurance agent said, oh, come to my networking group on Tuesday. Well, I'm still in that same networking group. They knew I was starting a business before I did, but if I was looking for a job, they would be an amazing resource. But what about now? How do you network? Most groups have moved virtual. That's why Zoom, everybody's on Zoom. So you can still look for networking groups virtually. Ask your connections because you've downloaded them. Hey, are you involved in any networking group that I could come virtually as a guest? The other thing is, it's really good to let your network know, not with a post necessarily, but one-to-one. Have those conversations. Say, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? How are you getting by with everything that's going on? How can I help you? Plus, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anybody? Or even better, be more specific. I see there's a job listing at XYZ company and you happen to know somebody there. Would you be comfortable making that introduction? That's that real magic of those second connections. You know somebody in between that can make that introduction for you. I just checking my notes, make sure that there's anything specific. Yes, so when you go in that jobs section on LinkedIn, I don't know how many of you have, sometimes it will let you click right to the company and it'll show you if you know anybody at that company. Somebody you met might have been in a different company before, but maybe they're there now. And a lot of companies, especially larger companies, it's hard to hire. So they actually give money to somebody that submits a resume if that person ends up being hired. So people want to submit your resume. So you should have no qualms about reaching out to somebody that you actually know to say, hey, can you submit my resume? Or do you know anything about this job? That type of thing. Any questions on the networking part of this? I know we mostly talked about LinkedIn, but I believe it's a great resource in combination with LinkedIn. All right, now I want to do something kind of fun. It's what I call a LinkedIn party trick. It will have more value in the future when we're out and about and closer than 6 feet from people, but I call it the dog walking trick. So if you have your phones with you and you have the LinkedIn app, open the LinkedIn app right now and imagine a month ago you were out walking your dog, someone else was walking their dog. You see them, the dogs are sniffing each other, you're talking. Wow, this person works somewhere. I totally want to connect with them. They know somebody in my industry. I'm trying to get into that company. You don't have a business card with you, but you always have your phone. So in the app, look in the search box on the homepage. There's this funny little symbol you might not have even noticed before. Click on that symbol and you'll notice a camera comes up. This actually works with just the camera on your phone as well. And what would happen in person is the other person would click my code. But here's an example of one. If you put your phone up to this code, the camera, on the screen, you'll see what happens. So I'll wait a minute and have a drink of water. Where is this? This is on the home page of the mobile app. In the search box, there's a funny little symbol. And if you don't see it on your phone, it could be the version of the app that you have. But so when it's in person, one person clicks scan, the other person picks the camera and you put it over the one phone over the other phone. in this case, and Ariel, you said you were speaking, you can do this when you're speaking so people can connect with you. You can put your code up on the screen and people can do that image. Some people will put their code on their business card. Again, someday we will be using business cards again. So I know we went through a lot of sections on your profile. The key is really to think of it as real estate and use all the real estate that they give you. So before we go to questions, while you have your phone out, if you want to join my mailing list, I don't send out a huge, I'm not one of those like torment you every day people. You can get on my mailing list through this URL, and I think we can move to questions. So let's see. Victor asks, how do you assess a general responsiveness of people to various LinkedIn interactions during the time of crisis versus the normal life condition? Yeah, it's hard to say. I have found that myself, I jump off. I'm less on LinkedIn, believe it or not. Right now, I'm definitely more on Facebook, because Facebook is where you have your town groups who are telling you like, oh, you know, this is where you can get Lysol wipes. So, but I think that people are still engaging. They're still reading interesting content. They're still engaging with that content. And here's a trick that I didn't tell you. So if there's somebody you want to work for or work with or works at a company that you want to work at, and they share content, this is very strategic now. If they share content, so a post, and they're not somebody you know, you can go to that content, you can like it, you can comment on it, and what if you ask a question? You have to read it, and then you say, oh, that was really interesting what you said about the blah, 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 and be authentic about it, really something that does interest you, and then ask them a question. If someone asks you a question on your content, what are you going to do? You're going to reply. You've just started a conversation with somebody that wouldn't necessarily take your phone call. And speaking of phone calls, I find that people are being more responsive on the phone now. It's because we're all at home. People are craving that voice and hearing people. I hope I answered your question there, Victor. Ariel, when you connect with people, you should always put a brief note in the invite. Yes, I didn't say that. We didn't talk about invites because we were talking about profile today. Always send a personalized message. And the reason is twofold. One, because I don't connect with people. If they just send me the random invite, I have no idea who they are. I'm not going to connect with them. The other is, say like we had actually met. We had done this in person at the library, and I connected with you, and we didn't speak. And then 6 months later, for some reason, your name came up, and I could not remember for the life of me. If I went back to the history of our messages through LinkedIn, the very first one would have been that connection invite, and I would say, oh, I met at the library. Great. It just reminds you of that. Any other questions? Please put them in the chat.
Hey, Beth, there was one that was from earlier.
About?
Does the person see that you've reviewed their page?
Oh, good one, yes. So under settings, you can either be public or private, or there's this weird middle one. Never use the weird middle one. Either be 100% public or anonymous. And what I recommend is 99% of the time be public, because it makes for familiarity. So if you go to someone's page, and we all look at who looked at our profiles, right? They might see your name and your photo and your headline. Okay. Then if the next day or whenever they get an introduction to you, your name is going to be familiar because they already saw you. The only time to be private is honestly if you're doing competitive analysis or stalking former boyfriends or girlfriends. I can't think of a reason other than that to be private. So really it's 90% of the time just be public. And that middle one makes no sense to me. So, and you can switch it back and forth as often as you like.